It's okay to want validation, but what happens when you need it? Last week I spoke about why we want to be heard and how sometimes we don't necessarily want people to agree with us, we simply want to feel understood. That got me thinking about something else: validation. I don't think validation is necessarily a bad thing. We all want to know we're doing okay. We want encouragement, we want appreciation, we want someone to tell us, I'm proud of you, you're doing well, I understand you. There's nothing wrong with that. But I think there's a point where something changes. There's a difference between wanting validation and depending on validation. That's what I want to talk about today. I think sometimes we make validation sound like a weakness, especially for men. There's this idea that you should never need reassurance, that you should always be confident, always know what you're doing, never care what anybody thinks. I don't think that's realistic. We're human beings, we're rational. Of course, it feels good when someone appreciates us. Of course, it feels good when someone believes in us. And sometimes we genuinely need someone to remind us of things we temporarily can't see in ourselves. I've experienced that myself, and I've also had people come to me for validation because they trust the way I think or they see a certain confidence in what I believe. I understand that. I've done the same thing with people I respect. I've gone to someone and thought, what do you think? Am I looking at this the right way? There's nothing wrong with that. The problem begins when their answer becomes the thing that determines your answer. Let me give you a simple example. Imagine you make a decision. You genuinely believe it's the right one, but then you tell five people about it. One agrees, the second agrees, the third isn't sure. The fourth tells you they think you're making a mistake. And suddenly you start doubting yourself. Not because you discovered your decision was wrong, but because somebody didn't approve of it. That's when I'd start asking, am I looking for wisdom or am I looking for permission? Those are two very different things. Seeking advice is healthy, but if I need everybody to agree with me because I feel secure about who I am, then I've given other people a lot of power over me, and that's dangerous. Scripture puts it plainly: fear of man will prove to be a snare, but whoever trusts in the Lord is kept safe, which we read of in Proverbs 29, verse 25. There's a quote I've heard before: if you live for people's applause, you'll die of their criticism. I think there's a lot of truth in that, because the same people whose approval makes you feel amazing can become the same people whose criticism destroys you. If my confidence is built on people telling me I'm attractive, what happens when someone tells me I'm not? If it's built on people telling me I'm successful, what happens when I fail? If my identity is built on people calling me a good person, what happens when somebody calls me a bad person? Eventually, I have to ask myself, what is actually holding me up? Because anything that can give you your identity can eventually control your identity. I think this applies to social media as well. We live in a world where validation is incredibly measurable: likes, views, comments, followers, shares. People can look at a number and decide whether something they created is valuable. I'm not saying those things don't matter at all, but there's a danger when we start confusing attention with value. A video getting 10,000 views doesn't automatically make what I said meaningful. A video getting 10 views doesn't automatically make it meaningless. The numbers measure attention, they don't measure my worth. And that's something we all need to remind ourselves of, because if I post something and feel amazing when people love it, and then tomorrow I post something and nobody responds, and suddenly I feel I'm not good enough. Maybe the problem isn't the algorithm. Maybe I've allowed the algorithm to become my mirror. My worth was never meant to be measured that way in the first place. I praise you because I'm fearfully and wonderfully made. Your works are wonderful. I know that full well, which we read of in Psalms 139, verse 14. So, what do we do about it? I don't think the answer is don't care what anybody thinks. Because honestly, I don't think that's possible, and I don't think it's necessarily healthy. There are people whose opinions are genuinely valued, people in my life who know me well enough to challenge me, whose advice I should listen to. So the goal isn't to become someone who doesn't care. The goal is to know whose voice deserves authority in your life. There's a difference between I value your opinion and I need your opinion to know who I am. The first is humility. The second can become dependence. Scripture calls us toward a mind that isn't shaped by the crowd. Do not conform to the pattern of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. Then you will be able to test and approve what God's will is, his good, pleasing, and perfect will, which we read of in Romans 12, verse 2. For me, this comes back to foundation. I've spoken about foundation in some of my previous notes, and the same principle applies here. If my identity is built on other people's opinions, my identity is going to constantly move. Today someone loves me, tomorrow someone criticizes me. Today I'm successful, tomorrow I fail. Today everybody understands me, tomorrow somebody completely misunderstands me. If my foundation moves with those things, I'm going to move with them. But if I have something deeper holding me together, my faith, my values, my principles, my understanding of who I am before God, I can listen to people without being controlled by them. I can accept encouragement without becoming addicted to it. I can accept criticism without being destroyed by it. I can even admit I'm wrong without feeling like my whole identity has collapsed. This is the posture Paul modeled. Am I now trying to win the approval of human beings or of God? Or am I trying to please people? If I was still trying to please people, I would not be a servant of Christ, which we read of in Galatians 1 verse 10. On the contrary, we speak as those approved by God to be entrusted with the gospel. We are not trying to please people but God, who tests our hearts. 1 Thessalonians 2 verse 4. There's also responsibility that comes with validation. If people come to you because they trust your opinion, you have to be careful how you use that influence. Sometimes someone isn't asking, what do you think? They're asking, can you tell me that I'm okay? And those aren't always the same question. If I care about somebody, I don't want to simply tell them what makes them feel good. I want to be honest with them, but I also don't want to use honesty as an excuse to be harsh. That's why I keep coming back to the balance between truth and love. Sometimes people need encouragement. Sometimes they need correction. Sometimes they need someone to say, you're actually doing better than you think. And sometimes they need someone to say, I understand why you feel this way, but I don't think this is good for you. Real friendship should have room for both. So I don't think validation is the enemy. I think dependence is the danger. It's okay to want to be appreciated. It's okay to want reassurance. It's okay to want someone to believe in you. But don't build your identity on something that can change every day. Because people change, opinions change, circumstances change, numbers change, feelings change. And if all of those things have the power to tell you who you are, you're going to spend your life trying to keep everybody happy just so you can remain okay with yourself. I don't want to live that way. I want to be able to hear people without being controlled by them. I want to receive encouragement without needing it. I want to receive criticism without being destroyed by it. And most importantly, I want to know who I am even when nobody is clapping. So maybe that's the question I'll leave with you today. If nobody approved of your decision, would you still believe it was the right one? And if the answer is no, maybe that's something worth exploring. Validation can be a beautiful gift. It just shouldn't become the foundation you stand on. I want to know who I am even when nobody is clapping. And that's today's note. My name is Lucky Mutsipe, and this has been Notes from the Journey, simply sharing the lessons I learned as I walk with Christ. If you've benefited from this note and you think someone else might as well, consider subscribing and sharing it with them. Till the next note, God bless.